It is time to rank all 5 Scream movies. So the Scream franchise is a franchise that I really adore and respect. It's not one of my favorite horror franchises of all time, but it's still a classic franchise. I've seen all of these movies, and let's just break into it with how I'd rank all 5 of these films. Starting off at number 5 is going to be Scream 3. I think this is the weakest installment of the franchise. I don't like the fact that there's only one killer, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you think about how this character gets around from point A to point B throughout the entirety of this movie, it really makes him feel like he's time traveling, or he's basically Jason and can just show up anywhere he wants. I also didn't like the fact that they were still kind of going in the past of who Sydney was and who her mom was. This movie to me felt like they were trying to rehash a lot of the plot points from the first film, but it just didn't really fall in its favor, and it's one that I think is probably the least memorable, and it's the last one I'd pull off the shelf to actually watch. Number 4 is going to go to Scream 2. This might be very surprising for a lot of people. I like Scream 2. I think Scream 2 is a very good sequel. However, I do think that this movie has a few issues. One of them is killing off Randy. Randy was one of the best characters. He was the audience. That's exactly who he was. And by killing off Randy, you lost that meta-ness. You lost that sense of someone speaking for the audience, because Randy understood the rules in the game of horror films, and he was one of the characters who understood that they were actually in a horror movie. So I loved Randy. I think it was such a sad occurrence that his character had to die. And I know Wes Craven actually regretted that decision over time, because he realized that they could have used Randy for the future of this franchise. I kind of like Billy Loomis's mom revealed as one of the killers. The second killer, I don't really kind of care, to be honest. It was weird how he wants to blame it on the movies, and the movies made him this way. His logic did not make any sense, and therefore, to me, it's just weak. But I also like how Cotton Weary kind of plays more of a role in this film, and also in Scream 3, and I think that's kind of cool. Number 3 is going to go to Scream 2022. This one was hard. It was either this or Scream 4, but I had to kind of sit down and think to myself, which one do I like more? And after watching the newest installment of Scream again, I kind of could see some trepidation in some of the logical issues with the killers in this film. Also, the requel aspect does work really well in this movie. However, the third act does get a little bit too meta. It gets a little too self-referential for its own good, and it kind of drags on a little bit in terms of the characters kind of realizing that they're in a horror movie and that they're playing these rules. And to me, it's like, we already had the idea. We already understood what was going on. However, I do like this cast of characters quite a bit. I like the fact that this movie doesn't bring in the legacy characters and put the spotlight on them. However, they do play a big role to this movie. And I like that this is a passing of the torch film onto the next generation of Scream movies. And not only Scream movies, but also Scream fans. I think that this movie does a really good job of, number one, really issuing the fact that this is an entirety of a franchise run that is almost in a way coming to a close, but also reopening and being brought back from the clutches of death. I think that that's really interesting. And I will say that this movie is the most predictable out of all of them. It just, to me, the logic, I guess, makes sense. I like the fact that they focus on toxic fandom, but it is a very predictable film that really, within the first 10-15 minutes of the movie, you can kind of pinpoint who exactly it's going to be. Number 2 is going to go to Scream 4. I love this movie. I just watched it again last night and in preparation for this video, and I really love the film. I think the twist of it being Jill Roberts, Sydney's cousin, is perfect. She is the least likely suspect out of all of them. And I would never have pinpointed her to being Ghostface at the end of this movie along with Charlie. Charlie I could see more of, but her I never saw that as a real possibility, because it felt like this movie was almost in a way passing the torch on to Emma Roberts, onto Jill Roberts as a character, and that we would kind of see her having to deal with, you know, Ghostface and the trauma that these attacks have on her future. But it doesn't go that way at all, and that's what I loved about this movie. I also think that this movie has one of the best and most genius openings out of all the Scream films, where it has 3 different opening sequences. It kind of tricks you by throwing in a opening with Lucy Hale, and then it has another opening with Kristen Bell, and then it has the actual opening with the 2 characters being Marnie and I kind of am spacing her friend's name, but it's pretty crazy how this movie just subverts your expectations throughout the entirety of the film. And it really is a callback to the original film, because it does try to reinvent the Scream franchise in a way with this new installment by kind of adding some new things to it and adding some new rules in play. And my number 1 is going to, of course, be the original Scream. This movie's a classic. It's iconic. This is the best film of the entire franchise. I really don't feel like I need to talk much about it, but I think that this movie works extremely well because they never take themselves seriously. They understand that they're in a slasher film. This is a movie that really kind of broke open the 4th wall. It also really allowed more films to be, you know, self-referential, more meta in nature, where they don't have to take themselves so seriously. This really elevated slashers to a whole new ballpark. I mean, Halloween H2O is a big spitting image of that, because Halloween H2O was so impressed with Scream that Halloween H2O was trying to be like what Scream was. Scream was that brand new toy that everyone wanted and every studio was lining up to make, but they were never able to quite replicate the formula that Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson and the geniuses behind the creation of Scream were able to inject into this film. I love it. I love the reveals at the end, how it takes you through a loop where is it Billy? Is it not Billy? It is Billy. Then you're like, I'm not sure it's Billy. They kind of throw you through different loops, and you can predict one thing and you may be right at the end of it, but you're so unsure if you're going to be right throughout the entirety of the film because the movie just changes so much, and I love that. Anyway, that is my ranking of the Scream franchise. Let me know your guys' ranking down below in the comments section of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and until the next video, do you like scary movies?